alleged Boston bomber Tamerlan believed he was a victim of mind control.
Well, the Boston Globe has released a 5-month investigation, a 73-page report on the Tsarnaev family. Now, they bill it as an in-depth investigation, but really it's kind of more like a People magazine profile. Nothing about Uncle Ruslan's CIA connections. As a matter of fact, there was no mention of the CIA at all. And of course, Ruslan was the only sane member of the family, according to the reporter. Anything that questioned the official narrative was just dismissed without any explanation. The Boston bomber is believed, however, to be the victim of mind control. That's the only nugget that came out of this, and Paul Joseph Watson did an interesting story on this today. He said he believed in majestic mind control, which is a way of breaking down a person and creating an alternative personality with which they must coexist. Now, here's the key. You can give them a signal, a phrase, or a gesture, and bring out the alternate personality and make them do things. Tamerlan thought someone might have done that to him. Well, of course, this is something that we've seen all along. Now, it could be that he was just schizophrenic and hearing voices, but when he talks about people getting him to do things based on cue, that sounds an awful lot like what we learned from the church committee hearings back in the 1970s about the MK Ultra program. We also saw this discussed in detail by many shooters, Sirhan, one of those. Now, with all these other events surrounding the Boston bombing, which this reporter does not even cover, it's actually more incriminating than what Aaron Alexis wrote on his gun when he did the Navy Yard shooting, my ELF gun, remember that? Indicating, as he had told many other people, that he thought he was a victim of mind control. But all of these circumstances are not even addressed in this 73-page article.
Boston bomber believed he was a victim of mind control. That should probably be red-linked. Tamerlan Tsarnaev, on record, was in a State Department CIA-sponsored program being sent to Chechnya, and the FBI had him under close surveillance. Then they said they never heard of him. Remember that lie? Folks, he was clearly a double agent, bare minimum, and now he says he was mind-controlled, and he is the exact type of candidate. Disappears for months on a government junket. That's when they do it to you. I mean, this is incredible. Boston bomber believed he was victim of mind control. Ladies and gentlemen, this just went from absolutely evidence that this was a staged event, overwhelming evidence with the drills and the stand-downs and the older brother being on the CIA payroll. Oh, that came out in the foreign press. British, Russian. It was confirmed he had a fake name. The Russian embassy said, is this guy a spy? They did this 3 years ago, 2 years before the bombing. They said, is this guy a spy for you? Because you let him fly with a fake name. And he's going to Chechnya and hanging out with rebels. And we know you run those rebels on record. Our government and NATO run the al-Qaeda forces in the Balkans and into the southern belly of Russia, into the Caucasus. That's all on record. A few months ago, the head of Saudi intelligence, Bandar, threatened publicly in Moscow at a meeting and said, we will trigger al-Qaeda to blow up the Olympics if you don't back off and do a peace deal in Syria. That's how dumb they think Westerners are, is that the Saudis can publicly threaten to activate al-Qaeda forces against the Russians and send in people like Tamerlan Tsarnaev. We don't know if he was a triple crosser, double agent, triple agent, set up, not set up. All we know is there was a drill of bombs going off at the finish line, and that's been confirmed. All we know is there was a stand down. All we know is the FBI lied and said we don't know who Tamerlan Tsarnaev is, when it turns out he was being handled by them, surveilled by them, followed in with a whole community in Florida and in Georgia and in New York and New Jersey and in Boston, Massachusetts. He was all over the country with Playboy glasses on and expensive $1,000 jackets on, driving brand new Mercedes Benzes without a job, being playboys, obviously some type of intelligence asset. And then he told friends, the Boston Globe now reports, he told friends, I'm under mind control. Folks, it's not like he's a schizophrenic on the street corner saying this. This guy fits the look, the musculature, a guy that thinks he's a commando, a kickboxer, they recruit him, a narcissism, the whole 9 yards for a decoy candidate for a born supremacy, born legacy type program. And by the way, those programs are declassified. the earlier programs. They had total mind control power by the 70s when they had the church hearings and others. Total mind control if they pick the right type of candidate. Other people will run off, go crazy, or kill themselves if they have a high moral fiber and are not narcissist. But with narcissists and those that already are mentally ill, they can break up their personalities with electroshock, drugs, all the rest of it. This is a complex area. There's a lot of different sciences that go into it. I'm just a lay researcher of it. They are able to absolutely imprint them with the program that they're basically a movie star doing this, and they feel so happy and so excited when they carry out the terror attack. Just like in the remake of the Manchurian Candidate with Denzel Washington, excellent film. You want to know mind control? That's how they do it. And when he gets the keywords, he smiles, feels great, and is a movie star. And it's the same deal with this hypnotism that they do under drugs, electroshock, and that's old technology, folks. The stuff they've got now is viruses they inject that literally attack areas of the brain so you don't have inhibition. Then they give them amnesics to wipe that. Then they give them an amnesic again to trigger the operation. Sirhan, it came out in the police reports, was under mind control, given a proto-halcyon type drug. That's the patsy shooter of RFK, who was the cover guy for Robert F. Kennedy. And then they had a known CIA agent behind him. The police even on record said that's where the shots came from, that shot him in the back. Look it up, folks. It's all on record. It's actually all come out. That's what's so frustrating about all this. Theodore Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was in MK Ultra, LA Times. Look it up. Alexander Cockburn, award-winning journalist, broke that. The documents were leaked and then declassified fully. The fact that he was in the program. He was in the program for a decade as a student, graduate student, and then adjunct. Kaczynski, total cutout setup. Who else said he was under mind control? Holmes, ladies and gentlemen, the so-called Batman shooter. Didn't know who he was when the SWAT team showed up, clearly drugged, put next to cells saying, flipping out on drugs for 2 days, saying, I'm under mind control, help me, they did it. He checked himself in, his dad, top algorithm scientist in the government and private corporations. He goes into an advanced DARPA above Air Force level program run by the Air Force, but Space Command, mind control, astronaut brain interface where the astronauts think and it controls the suits. He goes into an advanced brain machine mind control interface. This is on record. Has an Air Force colonel over him. He's full-time paid in a national top secret security level program, and goes from being a kid genius to having red hair and going and shooting people, even though they reported multiple shooters, smoke, all of it, people announcing, stay in your chairs, everything's safe. It was totally rigged. And he's out in the parking lot drooling. And then when it came out that all these people came out of the jail and said he was saying he was under mind control, he was screaming, and they took him away. The police came out and said, we're sealing all that, but he was always in solitary around no one. He was never in a general area where anyone could hear him, even though it had been in the paper earlier that they talked to the police who weren't part of it. The jail guard said, yeah, he was screaming, he was yelling, saying he was under mind control. It's not like it's only happening a few places here. Tamerlan Tsarnaev was in a Georgetown State Department CIA program. On record, undoubtedly. And the media here will not touch it. He's flying by fake names. Would you like me to continue, folks? Would you like me to continue going down the line? Ladies and gentlemen, you could take one look at Adam Lanza and all his government connections and his family, and one look at him trying to get guns 5 times, and one look at the stand down and the man caught with a gun in the woods in camo and black top that matched Lanza, and all the rest of it. They killed real people there, and now they've bulldozed the building. Wasn't all actors, but you watch it, folks, it's undoubtedly actors coming out, laughing, going, watch this, and then doing their fake cry over and over again, and then kids that were photographed coming out still alive. They are running major psyops. And you're like, well, why actually kill real people then? But then have actors. You want the actors to put out your official story and not come out and say, oh, I'm pro-gun, I'm sorry my kid's dead, but don't blame gun owners. These are major, 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 major psyops being run. And Paul Watson's coming up to break it down. But that story's on Infowars.com. Right now, Boston bomber believed he was a victim of mind control. And folks, remember, we sent our reporter to those press conferences to bring up the drills and to bring up the other people with backpacks, and the police would freak out covering it up. Boston bomber believes he was a victim of mind control. Now, here is Paul Watson. This is in the Boston Globe, but Paul Watson gives background. The Unabomber was under CIA mind control. That came out in the LA Times. The supposed Aurora shooter said he was under mind control. And now it comes out in the Boston Globe. He believed he was under mind control. Folks, he was under a CIA-funded program to Chechnya. This is literal born supremacy type stuff. This is amazing. Paul Watson, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Alex.
Break it down, my friend.
Yeah, this is the result of a 5-month investigation by the Boston Globe, and they basically talked to a whole host of people who intimately knew the Tsarnaev brothers. One of them, Donald Larking, a 67-year-old who attended the Boston Mosque with Tamerlan Tsarnaev, told the Boston Globe he believed in majestic mind control, which is a way of breaking down a person and creating an alternative personality with which they must coexist. You can give a signal, a phrase, or a gesture and bring out the alternate personality and make them do things. Tamerlan thought someone might have done that to him. So they're talking about trigger phrases, trigger words, trigger images and symbols that make people do violent actions as a result of mind control, which, as you just mentioned, in the case of James Holmes, the Batman shooter, he said to an inmate of his that he was, quote, programmed to carry out the massacre by an evil therapist who brainwashed him with the aid of neuro-linguistic programming. So again, we're talking about trigger phrases used to turn to shift from one personality to another that's been created by mind control, which is interesting because we know that Holmes, immediately before the massacre began, took a phone call, was talking to somebody on the phone, then began with the shooting. Now, there was a British program, a television special, which aired a few years ago in the UK by quite a famous hypnotist called Derren Brown. And he was able to actually brainwash somebody, mind control them to carry out an assassination, which the subject thought was real, an assassination of a famous person in public. And the trigger for carrying out that assassination was a woman dressed in a polka dot skirt. So when it actually came to the assassination, the woman walked in the polka dot dress, and this individual, who beforehand was completely calm and normal, who thought that he was just attending a theater show, pulled out a gun and assassinated in his own mind. The shots were obviously blanks, but he thought he was really assassinating a public figure. So these trigger words, these trigger images are proven in MK Ultra CIA mind control law to actually work, and they can actually create these mind control assassins, which of course happened in the case of Sirhan and the assassination of RFK.
And by the way, this is not our opinion now. Again, it came out in the LA Times, you might add this, that Theodore Kaczynski on record was in the MK Ultra program. And so undoubtedly, they're bare minimum using it to have them there drugged out of their minds, to blame them for things that later happened, but to also carry out attacks. And because the general public's been mesmerized by television and is generally already in a near sleepwalking haze. People say the public's in a haze. You can't get through to them. Because if you watch 3-4 hours of television a day, you literally go into a zombified state. That's why children, you can't talk to them if they're watching TV. You're like, hey, don't you hear me? Their mouths are hanging open. The flicker rate is set just like a flashing light to literally put them into that state. So the public is so weak-minded now that, as you pointed out, hypnotists can find highly suggestible people and have them commit assassinations just off hypnotism. You add drugs, and of course this guy was under a top Air Force colonel in a brain interface DARPA program. Now imagine, you get put into this, you get hypnotized, next you're drugged. They sealed his notebook. They declared national security on that. I mean, Paul, there's really no doubt now. But again, they know the public's so dumb, they're hiding this in plain view, Paul. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Well, I mean, talk about hiding it in plain view. You remember the guy they arrested during the manhunt for the Boston bombers, the so-called naked guy who was supposed to be a different person? You can see clearly that it's Tamerlan Tsarnaev. They arrested him. He was completely unharmed, uninjured. And then, you know, a few hours later, he died in a police shootout. See his autopsy photos. He's riddled with bullet holes.
And I predicted they'd try to kill the other brother, which they knew he was in the boat. They shot it, and by the grace of God, they only hit him a few times. He got out. Then I said, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna shut him up." And then they did, but still, he's saying he didn't do it. He says not guilty.
And the friend of the bombers, Todashev, you know, they held him in his own apartment for 5 days, interrogated him. And then just shot him in the head. Claimed he lunged at them with a knife. Later had to admit that was completely made up. And just no explanation, just shot him in the head. He was an eyewitness to what went on. So
this is literally the Bourne legacy. This is literally the Bourne legacy. This is literal mind control out in the open, targeting the dumbed-down general public. They know we know. We know the drill. We know how they did it. We know he was CIA. The little brother was, oh my gosh, stay there, Paul. This is so evil, ladies and gentlemen. We have the other angle of who they're picking for their mind control. And it's clear if you go back, it's the same story with the situation at Littleton. Clearly they had a federal mind control program under death education going on there. Half the school was empty that day. There were 247 bombs found in the building. CBS News, that got covered up. They were supposed to kill hundreds. They got set up. There were other shooters. They admit the SWAT team shot several of the kids. Rocky Mountain News. Media works to keep mass shooters' profiles secret. The profile is a video game head goth who's into the occult, who they then grab and program because they're already unstable and ready. Separately, though, or their research students in advanced secret programs, the Unabomber, Theodore Kaczynski, Holmes from Colorado, Aurora, that's the other MO. They get research college students, Tamerlan Tsarnaev. He was in a research program sent by the State Department out of that key command base there in D.C., Georgetown. And you've got that in your article. So, Paul, this is really amazing. They either get drug head, devil worshippers that already play 10 hours a game, 10 hours a day of video games. I'm trying to talk fast, folks, and messing up, trying to get to it all here. Who are devil worshippers and already on drugs and are naturally programmed by kind of the ambient brainwashing system, or they get people in research programs as their cover. Paul Watson.
Well, the question is, Alex, why do they need to stage all this? Well, it's for the security state. They need these incidents to keep the level of fear-mongering high so the general public will accept the kind of security measures that, you know, companies linked to the military-industrial complex make massive profits out of, and the government itself gets more power out of it. If there weren't these kind of incidents, their slush fund would be instantly terminated. And, you know, it stretches back all the way to Sirhan, because 3 months before RFK was assassinated, he disappeared for 3 months, Sirhan, in the hands of this, psychologist working for the CIA, who actually later turned up dead himself in a hotel room of a suspected suicide. So the people who are actually doing the brainwashing end up dead as well. But then you've got that whole investigation into, the two shooters at the RFK assassination, Sirhan being in a trance before he pulled the trigger, and his lawyers, with increasing conviction, are proving the fact that he was probably the first mind control patsy. And as you said, it's not always people who go out and do the killings. It's the need to create patsies so then the actual operation can take place.
Stay there. Do 5 more minutes with us, and I'm giving the number out and taking calls. Yeah, here's the Daily Mail. Bobby Kennedy's assassin still claims he was a victim of mind control and his gun didn't fire a fatal shot. A new appeal after parole is denied. He doesn't claim that. The local police report said it was a different caliber shot RFK in the back of the neck and head. And at the same time, his gun got pinned by a bystander when the guy that shot RFK in the back was a CIA Skunks Works worker. That's a secret aircraft facility worker. And at the same time, 3 famous CIA agents were later documented to be in the crowd at the ballroom. right before this happened. So obviously they'd killed his brother, the president. They were going to kill him. Watson, in the 3-4 minutes we've got left in this short segment, he was seen with the lady in the polka dot dress. She gives him a drink, obviously, of some type of amnesiac. He's given his programming cue, and he goes and then plays the part of the patsy. That's where you left off.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying with the television show. They recreated that almost exactly, the girl with the polka dot dress. She was the trigger for him to go and pull the actual trigger and be the patsy for the assassination. And then, of course, the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigations in '75 were preceded 2 years beforehand by CIA Director Richard Helms ordering the destruction of all files related to MKUltra in 1973, 2 years before these investigations took place. So whereas a lot of information about them came out from whistleblowers, most of the actual physical evidence was destroyed by the CIA 2 years beforehand. So it's amazing. But the other point you made before the break was, you know, you're in the FBI, not the lower level FBI aren't involved in this kind of thing. That was brought home to me today. There's a CBS News interview with the NSA. They got inside access to the NSA building, and they were like, this is not going to be a puff piece. Of course, it was a total puff piece. But they were asking the director of the NSA questions, Alexander. And in one case, they asked him a question about Snowden, and he had to turn around and ask somebody in, quote, the shadowy group of figures behind him, if it was okay for him to talk about a certain issue relating to Snowden. So the director of the NSA is having to ask his superiors in the NSA permission to speak about a certain subject on CBS News, and he's supposed to be the top guy. So there are guys above him. So again, it brings home
these
the point.
top guys don't, in most cases, know anything that's going on. I mean, that's on record. That's how the globalists run these operations.
They just read the teleprompters.
That's right. You've got permanent members in the shadow government burrowed in like ticks.
And yeah, those are the kind of guys who are going to be involved in MKUltra and these programs. That's why they destroy the files before they can be properly investigated. But again, with Jared Lee Loughner, the gunman who shot Gabby Giffords, he was obsessed with mind control. And then you tie that in with the psychiatric drugs, which induce violence, and, you know, it's a cocktail for carnage, basically.
Well, here's the deal. The shoot-'em-up video games, and the video game heads get mad at me when I say this. I'm not saying take away your murder training tools. My whole point is First Amendment. You've got a right to it. I have a right. They think censorship is disagreeing with them. No, censorship is stopping you. The shoot-'em-up games were invented to create instinctive shooting, to create killing machines. You put devil-worshipping people on serotonin reuptake inhibitors that make you kill people on this. It makes you a programmed assassin. These games were made to program Marine Corps and Army killers to instinctively kill. Then the government takes kids that already fit the profile, drug them up even more, and point them at the target. It's very simple.
And that's why they use them for drone pilots as well.
That's right. They recruit their drone pilots out of the pool of video game heads, just like The Last Starfighter, just like Ender's Game. They had declassified plans before those movies and books came out in the 80s that was what video games were for, to have interactive giant game grids to pick the people they want for the future and to train the computers. The computers are all wargaming what you do. You won't be needed in the future. The fact that the Boston Globe is now reporting that the supposed lead Boston bomber, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, believed that he was under MKUltra mind control. Ladies and gentlemen, he was under a secret State Department program run by the CIA out of Georgetown University to send him to be with Chechen rebels in Chechnya. That is in the major British and German newspapers months ago. There was a drill of a bombing at the Boston Marathon that was used to have everybody in place. In case anybody got caught carrying it out, they would just say it was part of a drill. You had the stand down of the police. You had all the other people with the backpacks. You had the cover-up. This is really incredible when you add to it all the other bombers and people and all the other mass shooters who it turns out were in CIA programs. And this comes out, and then literally no one gets in trouble. there are no investigations. Remember, the FBI lied and said, we don't know who Tamerlan Tsarnaev was. We never heard of him. Turned out, I said 2 years. It was actually 3 years before. They were in contact with him, in meetings with him, debriefing him about his trips to Chechnya. And the family is on record saying that he was basically working for the government. And then I call the family back, the aunt and others, and they start crying and have basically been threatened. Yes, I'm ready to come on your show. Call back 20 minutes later. My children, no, they will get them. They will smash me, they said. No. Oh. I mean, this is the life I live, living in the real world, ladies and gentlemen. And now the Boston Globe's reporting this, is that they run people under CIA programs. The Boston lead bomber suspect, the one they tried to kill, has said, I'm not guilty, and they are saying national security on what he's saying. I know what it's saying. My brother was in the government, was set up. Because we know he was in the government. And now he told his friends and family, I was under mind control. That's coming out in the trial, the secret trial of his brother. It's coming out, and I can't believe the Boston Globe actually told the truth about this. Good job, Boston Globe. Because most people aren't in on this, folks. We're just ignorant and don't want to admit where we're at. Just like Tamerlan Tsarnaev was working for the CIA. That's confirmed. There was a drill. There was a stand down. There was a cover-up. They tried to kill both brothers. The other brothers said he's not guilty. I'm telling you, folks, it's a setup.